Hey guys, welcome back to another long, quiet drift through history. So, get comfortable, dim the lights, maybe pour a cup of tea, or, something stronger. Tonight, we're floating back to the 1930s, a decade that looked calm on the surface, but was basically a slow-motion train wreck dressed in a tuxedo. This is why World War II started. Or, as I like to call it, that time humanity said, let's do that whole global disaster thing again. Now, before we even see the first tank roll across Poland, we need to talk about the hangover from the previous party, World War I. Because, let's be honest, World War II was basically the sequel no one asked for. After the First War, Europe's emotional breakdown. So, picture Europe in 1918. The Great War has just ended. Millions are dead, cities are shattered, and every surviving politician is pretending they totally knew what they were doing the whole time. Germany, meanwhile, is, well, not having a great time. They'd lost the war, lost their empire, and lost any remaining sense of chill. The once proud Kaiser had fled to the Netherlands to do whatever disgraced monarchs do, probably complain about democracy while feeding ducks. And then there was the Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919. Ah, Versailles. The treaty that was supposed to bring peace, but instead just quietly set the timer for the next disaster. It blamed Germany for pretty much everything, including things that weren't entirely their fault. Like, sure, they started the war, but it's not like Austria-Hungary was innocent, right? Anyway, Germany got hit with massive reparations. Basically, a bill so high it made the national economy spontaneously combust. To put it simply, imagine losing your job, your house, and then being told to pay everyone else's rent for the next 20 years. And that's pretty much what happened. So, Germany tried democracy. It was called the Weimar Republic, and it was fine. Except for the part where it constantly collapsed, hyperinflation turned money into wallpaper, and everyone hated everyone else. In 1923, things got so bad that you could use a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread, assuming the baker didn't raise the price while you were still wheeling it over. People were literally burning paper money for warmth. It was a very cozy apocalypse. And in that chaos, radical political movements started popping up like mushrooms after a thunderstorm. The communists promised equality, the far right promised national pride, and the exhausted middle class just wanted someone, anyone, to make the trains run again. Enter Adolf Hitler, an Austrian painter turned professional ranter who somehow decided that destiny had called him to fix Germany by shouting louder than everyone else. Meanwhile, in Italy. But before we dive too deep into Hitler's mood swings, let's float south to Italy for a moment, because they were already ahead of the angry man with flags trend. Italy, despite being on the winning side of World War I, felt like they'd been ripped off. They expected land, glory, maybe a free pizza, and instead they got awkward silence at the peace table. Enter Benito Mussolini, the original fascist influencer. He came to power in 1922, basically by walking into Rome and saying, "I'm in charge now." And everyone just kind of went, "Yeah, okay, sure." He wore dramatic uniforms, did big hand gestures, and invented fascism, a political ideology that basically said, Democracy is for losers. Mussolini made the trains run on time, allegedly, conquered a bit of Africa, and generally strutted around like the main character in a bad opera. Hitler, watching from Germany, was impressed. He looked at Mussolini and thought, I want to be that guy, but taller, louder, and with worse ideas. France and Britain, the tired babysitters. Meanwhile, France and Britain were sitting around pretending everything was fine. They'd won World War I, but it didn't feel like winning. France was traumatized. Britain was broke. Everyone was sick of war and just wanted a nice, quiet decade. So, when dictators started popping up all over Europe, their general response was shrug. It was the political equivalent of hitting snooze on an alarm that says fascism rising, which, to be fair, wasn't working great. Japan decides it's also a superpower. Now, let's quietly drift east, all the way to Japan. Japan had been modernizing rapidly since the late 1800s, and by the 1930s, they were feeling very confident. Too confident, really. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, a region of China, because, well, resources. They wanted more land, more power, and apparently didn't think international law applied to them. The League of Nations, the world's new peacekeeping organization, gently told them to stop. Japan basically said, nah, and just walked out of the League like a teenager storming out of family therapy. And what did the rest of the world do? Nothing. No one wanted to start another war over it. So Japan took note. Oh, so we can just invade people now? Yes. Yes, they could. Germany's comeback tour. Back in Germany, Hitler had turned his beer hall movement into a full-blown political machine. By 1933, he was appointed chancellor, not because everyone loved him, but because the conservative elite thought they could control him. Spoiler alert, they could not. Once in power, Hitler wasted zero time dismantling democracy. He banned opposition parties, censored the press, and turned the government into one big Nazi fan club. And of course, he blamed everything on the usual suspects, communists, Jews, and intellectuals, because nothing says leadership than picking scapegoats. And Germany's economy did recover, though, mostly through massive public spending on highways, weapons, and uniforms. Unemployment dropped. People started to feel proud again. The Nazi propaganda machine made sure everyone knew who to thank. And Hitler, he was thrilled. He started giving speeches about destiny and greatness and Lebensraum, which literally means living space. Basically, he wanted more land for Germans to live on, preferably land that already belonged to other people. And the world ignored the obvious. By the time it was 1936, Hitler was already breaking the Treaty of Versailles left and right. He rebuilt the army. He put troops in the Rhineland, which was supposed to stay demilitarized. France and Britain noticed and then did absolutely nothing. Their reasoning, we don't want to provoke him, which historically has never been a solid plan. So Hitler kept going. He made alliances with Italy and Japan, the Axis powers, basically saying, we're the cool kids now. And together they started dreaming of a world run by dictators, which sounds like a terrible Netflix show, but was real. The Spanish Civil War, Europe's dress rehearsal. In 1936, Spain decided it also wanted to implode. The Spanish Civil War broke out between left-wing Republicans and right-wing nationalists. It was brutal, messy, and served as a kind of warm-up for World War II. Hitler and Mussolini sent troops and planes to help the fascist side, because of course they did, while the Soviet Union helped the other side. Meanwhile, France and Britain officially did nothing but quietly panic. The war ended with the fascists winning, led by Francisco Franco, who would go on to rule Spain for decades with all the charisma of a tax audit. But the real takeaway for Hitler? Europe was divided, weak, exhausted, and no one had the energy to stop him. Let's pause here, because by 1938, Europe was teetering on the edge. Germany was strong again, the dictators were feeling bold, and everyone else was